Sechas Megillah Daf discusses the 4 special readings which take place in or around the month of Adar. The Gemara will have a number of machloks in what happens when a Shabbos falls out on a Rosh Chodesh or Purim falls out on a Shabbos. Where do these readings end up? Are they moved forward to Shabbos or backwards to Shabbos? The Gemara will resolve those machloks and then it'll quote a Mishnah which discusses the other Yom Tov readings and when they where we read for each particular Yom Tov. So to introduce this, let's review the Mishnah on Daf Chavtes, which introduced these 4 readings, and a Brisa later on in Daf Lamed, which tells us how we arrange them. So the Mishnah lists the 4 special readings, and it says that it works as follows. We have the 4 are Shkalim, Zachar, Para, and HaChodesh. Now, they're all meant to take place in around the month of Adar. Adar is 29 days, which means it's 4 weeks plus a day. So if it starts on a Shabbos, it could also end just before a Shabbos or on a Shabbos, and you would have 4 weeks and 5 Shabbosim. So the Mishnah lists the 5 Shabbosim. It says if Rosh Chodesh Adar is on a Shabbos, so then the first Shabbos you read Parsha Shkalim, skip a week. Then second it says Zachar, third it says is Para, fourth is a Chodesh, and fourth and the fifth you go back to the regular readings. Our Gemara will also discuss what that means. You go back to the regular readings. Now the Brisa later on Daf Lamed, that's our current Daf, says as follows. And our Gemara will try to bring a number of proofs from this Brisa to help with our machlokes. So let's get this Brisa down. So it says Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Shabbos. You read from Parshas Kisisa, so that's Parshas Shkalim. Maftir is Yehoyada. What is the first Shabbos? It defines it as any Shabbos in which Rosh Chodesh Adar falls in the coming week. Chol Rosh Chodesh Adar lios b'socha. Rosh Chodesh Adar is in the coming week. That's called the first Shabbos. Then it says explicitly, even on a Friday. Important to keep that in mind. Even if it's on a Friday, still that's called the first Shabbos. Now the second, we read Parshas Zachar. The mafter is Pakadati from Sefer Shmuel. Says the Brisa, how do you define the second Shabbos? Anything that has Purim in the coming week, even if it's on Friday. Keep that in mind as well. Now, the third week is Parshas Par, which is, we read from the Para Aduma, and the Haftorah is V'zarakti Aleichem. That's a special reading from Yecheskel, where Hashem is Mataheras. Says the Brisa, how do you define the third Shabbos? That's the Shabbos immediately following Purim. And the fourth Shabbos, it says is HaChodesh, and there we read, of course, from Parshas Vay, and the Haftarah is Kayam Hashem Elokim Barishon Be'echel HaChodesh, and that's in Sefer Yecheskel as well. Now, how do you define the fourth Shabbos? So that is the Shabbos which is immediately preceding Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Rosh Chodesh Nisan is in the coming week. Okay, so let's begin our daf now. So the daf says, what happens when Parshas Shkalim, which is a reading on the beginning, it's the first Aliyah in Kisisa, when that happens before or after Parshas Kisisa itself. So what happens when it falls before Parshas Kisisa? That means we're reading Parshas Tetzaveh this week. So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafach says no problem. You read Parshas Tetzaveh, and then you read the first Aliyah of Kisisa, which is actually the following Aliyah. It's the Aliyah right after Parshas Tetzaveh. Now our Gemara is assuming that you only read 7. There are 6, and then the maftir is the 7th aliyah. We don't paskin that way, but that's what our Gemara assumes. So now the Gemara says that Abai says you can't do that because people aren't going to realize that you're reading a special reading for Parshas Shkalim. They're just going to think that Tetzaveh ends at the end of the first aliyah of Parshas Kisisa, which comes right afterwards. So Abai says therefore you have to do something different. You have to repeat. So he says you do the entire from Parshas the beginning of Tetzaveh through the end of the first aliyah of Kisisa, and then you repeat that aliyah again so that you're doing something different so that it's noticeable. Okay, says the Gemara, let's try to bring a proof to this. So the Gemara says we have a brisa that says that if Shkalim falls either before or after Kisisa, so then you repeat. So you see, like Abaye, you have to be repeating. Says Rabbi Yitzchak Nafka, hold on a second. Abaye's argument makes sense, you repeat if Shkalim falls in Parshas Tetzaveh. But if Shkalim falls in Parshas Vayakel, so then you're going to read Parshas Vayakel, and then you're going to read Kisisa, the first aliyah. Why would you repeat anything? Even according to Abaye, that doesn't make sense. So what does it mean? What it means to say is that you read the same Parsha 2 weeks in a row. You repeat the Parsha 2 weeks in a row. That's what it means to say. Because last week you lay in Kisisa, and this week you lay in Kisisa. So guess what? It fits with me the other way also. Tetzaveh, if Shkalim falls in Tetzaveh, you'll read Kisisa on Parshas Tetzaveh week because of Shkalim, and you'll read it again the next week because it's a Parsha of the week. But within 1 week, there aren't any repetitions. You do not have any proof to that at all. Okay, says the Gemara now, what happens if Parsha Shkolim actually falls on Parsha Kisisa? Same week. It is the Parsha that Shkolim is the Parsha of the week. It's the first Aliyah in Kisisa, which is anyway the Parsha of the week. So Ritzchak Nafcha says, so you lay in your 6 Aliyahs from the end of the first Aliyah. You don't lay in the first Aliyah. You start one Aliyah in, you lay in 6 Aliyahs in Parshas Kisisa, and then you go back and you lay in the first Aliyah. That way you've laid the special Aliyah of Shkolim as the last Aliyah in the Parsha, because it's supposed to be the last Aliyah, it's the Maftir, you don't have to repeat anything. Says Abai, people are just going to think you're laying that in order. They're not going to realize that you actually laid the Parsha Shkolim now. You think you laid Kisisa in the wrong order. So therefore what you have to do is you have to actually read the entire Kisisa from the beginning to the end, and then go back and repeat Shkolim so that people see that you're reading something special. Okay, now the Gemara introduces the topic of what happens when the thing which triggers a special parsha falls on a Friday. As we've seen, our Bryces seem to spell that out, but the Gemara is going to show it's not so clear. So the first discussion is Parshas Shkolim. So Parshas Shkolim, is meant to be read the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh Adar. Says the Gemara, what happens if the Shabbos before what happens if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Friday? So you would seem to think it's obvious you should go back to the previous Shabbos. That's what Rav holds. Says Shmuel, not so fast. What's Shmuel's reasoning? Shmuel says you actually go forward to tomorrow. You're going to read Parshas Shkolim the day after Rosh Chodesh Adar. What's the reason? So Shmuel says like this. The whole reason that we're reading Parshas Shkolim before Rosh Chodesh Adar is because we want to give people notice that they have to prepare their Shkolim to bring to the Beis HaMikdash to buy new karbonis. That should be done 2 weeks before the money changers set up shop to start exchanging money so that people could get Shkolim. We want to give people 2 weeks advance notice. Now those money changers always set up shop on the 15th of the month. Says, and we would like them to have 2 full weeks notice, so therefore we want to start at least 2 weeks before they set up. So therefore we want to be before Rosh Chodesh Adar. So they have 2 weeks from Rosh Chodesh Adar until they set up, which is on the 15th, 2 weeks later. So we have to therefore read Parshas Shkolim before Rosh Chodesh Adar. Says Shmuel, no, hold on a second. But if Rosh Chodesh is on a Friday, that means that the day that they're usually going to set up shop is also going to be on a Friday. Right? It's going to be the 15th. They're not going to set up their money changing stands on a Friday. It's not covered Shabbos. It's not going to set it up till Sunday. So even if you read Parshas Shkolim on the day following Rosh Chodesh, because Rosh Chodesh was on a Friday, you're still going to have 2 weeks until they set up shop, because they're not going to set up shop until 2 weeks later, Sunday. So you'll have plenty of time. So that's the Gemara's machlokes. So now the Gemara says, okay, let's try to bring proofs to one way or another. So the Gemara first says, well, let's look at our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says that you clearly define the first week, the week when you read Parshas Shkolim, as the week in which Parshas as the Shabbos in which Rosh Chodesh falls in the following week. So that would seem to indicate that if it falls any time in that week, you should read Shkolim before. So if it falls on a Friday, you should read Shkolim the preceding Shabbos. So the Gemara says no. It says in the week, it means in the middle of the week. If it falls on Friday, that's as good as if it fell on Shabbos, and you'll read it that coming Shabbos. The Gemara says, okay, now let's go to the Brisa which we quoted earlier. So the Brisa says, what is the definition of the first Shabbos? Anything which is Chal Rosh Chodesh Adar Lias B'Socha, where Rosh Chodesh Adar falls in it. That's how you define the first Shabbos. And here it says, even on a Friday. So now that would seem to be obvious. Even on a Friday, it's called in it. Right? Even on a Friday. That means that it's called, that if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Friday, that's called the week that Rosh Chodesh Adar falls in, and you read Rosh Chodesh, you read Shkolim on the Shabbos before that. It's clear. The Gemara says no. When we say that the week that Rosh Chodesh Adar falls in it, we mean that it falls on that Shabbos. This Bryce is not talking about if Rosh Chodesh Adar comes out on a weekday. It's talking about if Rosh Chodesh Adar comes out on a Shabbos. And it says the week that Rosh Chodesh Adar falls in it means on that Shabbos. You know what? If it falls on a Friday, it's also considered part of that Shabbos. So it will be, if it falls on Friday, in the coming Shabbos, the Shabbos that's about to arrive, that will be called Rosh Chodesh Adar falling in it, and that's when you'll read Parshas Shkolim. That's how Shmuel understands it. So now the Gemara says, actually this machlokes between Rav and Shmuel is a machlokes tanoim. We have a machlokes between Rav Yehuda Hanasi and Rav Shimon ben Elazar. Do you skip a Shabbos or not between Parshas Shkolim and Parshas Zachar? So the Gemara quotes Rav Shimon ben Elazar, who says that our whole machlokes is only if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Friday. If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls any other time during the week, you obviously have to lay in the preceding Shabbos. which means that you have 2 Shabbosim until Purim. So you're going to skip a Shabbos because you want to lane Parshas Zachar close to Purim. You're definitely going to have to skip there. The whole shaila is what happens when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Friday. There we have a machlokes, because if you're going to lane the coming Shabbos, you're only going to have 1 Shabbos till Purim. And that's why I say you don't skip. Yudanasi says you do skip, and that's because he says you go back to the preceding Shabbos and you have 2 Shabbos in between that Shabbos and Purim, so you skip 1 and lane Parshas Zachar close to Purim itself. Okay, now the Gemara asks Shaila, what happens when Purim falls, when Purim itself falls on a Shabbos? So now you have the same exact machlokes we had about Parshas Shkolim, you now have about Parshas Zachar. Parshas Zachar, we said, is defined as being read on the week in which, on the Shabbos, that Purim falls in the coming week. So that's the same way we defined Shkolim as when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls in the coming week. So the same machlokes Rav and Shmuel applies here. What happens when Purim falls on a Friday? Do we read Parshas Zachar this coming Shabbos, the Shabbos immediately following that Friday, or do we read it on the preceding Shabbos? What's the logic here? So Rav says you have to go back to the preceding Shabbos, because otherwise you're going to end up first keeping Purim and then reading Parshas Zachar. That means first you're going to do Purim, which is an action of destroying Amalek, and then the next day you're going to read about destroying Amalek. So you're going to first do it and then read about it backwards. You have to first read about it and then do it. Shmuel says no. The people in the Mukafin, in the walled cities, are going to do Purim on that same Shabbos. That's fine. You could read it and do about it the same Shabbos. At least the people in the walled cities are doing it that day specifically. Okay, so now the Gemara says, let's look at our Mishnah and our Brisa and see if we could figure out any proof from here also. So first of all, the language of a Mishnah says that Zachar is the second Shabbos. If Zachar is the second Shabbos, our Mishnah was talking about where Rosh Chodesh Adar fell on a Shabbos. So it said Rosh Chodesh Adar that falls on a Shabbos, you lay in Shkolim. That's the first Shabbos. And the second Shabbos is Zachar. So when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Shabbos, guess when Purim falls? Purim falls on a Friday. And here we're saying that you're going to lay it on the second Shabbos. That means that it'll be on the Shabbos immediately following Rosh Chodesh Adar. That's the Shabbos preceding that Friday. So that seems clearly like Rav. When Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on it, when Purim falls on a Friday, you're going to read Parshas Zachar on the preceding Shabbos. Says no. When we said the second Shabbos, we didn't mean the second Shabbos after Shkolim. We meant the second Shabbos after the break. We said that you read Parshas Shkolim, take a Shabbos off, and the second Shabbos you read Parshas Zachar. That's after the Shabbos off, and that's going to be the Shabbos of the 15th of Adar, which is the day immediately following Purim, when it falls out that way. Okay, now the Gemara goes to the Brisa. The Brisa again said that the definition of Parshas Zachar is the Shabbos in which Purim falls in the coming week. That Purim falls in it. It uses the word besocha. That also seems, and it says even on a Friday. That would seem to indicate that when Purim falls on a Friday, that's defined as the coming week. So that means you read it in the Shabbos before. That's not what it means. What we mean to say is, again, when Purim falls on it, Purim falls on that Shabbos, not on that week, on that Shabbos. So we're talking about where Purim falls on a Shabbos, or Purim falls on a Friday. That's the same thing. Purim falling on a Shabbos, Purim falling on a Friday, both counts as being on that Shabbos, and therefore we're going to read Parshas Zachar that Shabbos. Purim falls on Shabbos, Purim falls on Friday, that's the Shabbos in which we are going to read it. Alright, now the Gemara asks, what happens when Purim falls on Shabbos? The Yud Daled Adar falls on Shabbos. Do we still have a machlokes? Because over here, does Rav still say that you can't lane Parshas Zachar on Purim? Rav wants Parshas Zachar to be read before Purim so that the reading is before the doing? Or is he okay if they're the same day? So one says it's a machlokes, whether or not there is a machlokes. Rav Huna says, here everybody agrees, Rav has no problem with it, you could do Purim and read Parshas Zachar the same day. Nachman says no, there's still a machlokes. Rav says it has to be read before Purim, can't be read on Purim. And Shmuel will still say no, it could be read on Purim, that's not a problem, just like he said for Purim Dimul Kafin. Now the Gemara quotes Rav Chia bar Abba in the name of Rabbi Abba, in the name of Rav, who says when Purim falls on a Shabbos, we go back a week and we lay in the previous week, and that seems to support that position that the machlokes still exists. Alright, now the Gemara moves on to discuss Para Aduma. The Gemara quotes a brisa that says, what is the third Shabbos? What is the Shabbos of Para Aduma? That's the Shabbos immediately following Purim. Then the Gemara has a statement of Rav Chama bar Chanina that says that it's the Shabbos that immediately precedes Rosh Chodesh Nisan. So the Gemara wants to know which is it. The Gemara says it's not a machlokes. It depends when Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls out. If Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls on a Shabbos, then between Purim and that Rosh Chodesh, there are 2 Shabbosim. There are 2 more weeks. Then you won't have a problem. You could read Parshas Chodesh on Rosh Chodesh Nisan, and you could read Parshas Para in the week immediately preceding that, because we want that to be as close to Pesach as possible. If, however, you end up having to read, Rosh Chodesh Nisan falls during the week, then Parshas Chodesh has to be read on the Shabbos preceding that, and then you only have 1 other week between that and Purim, and that's going to be the week in which you're going to read Parshas Para, and it'll be the week immediately following Purim. You will not have another Shabbos there in between, which you can insert. So they're not arguing, talking about different situations and whether another Shabbos exists there or not. Now the Gemara quotes the Brisa, which we quoted earlier, and then the Gemara refers back to our Mishnah, where we said that the 5th week, go back to the regular reading. The Gemara quotes a Machlokes, which we've seen on Daf Chav Tes, which is go back to the regular reading of what? So Rav Ami says you go back to the regular Parshas, because these 4 weeks we did not read the Parshas HaShavua at all. Rav Yirmi says, no, we read the Parshas HaShavua, we only changed the Haftorah, so we go back to the regular Haftoros. So now Abaye says it's logical, like Rav Ami, that you should go back to the regular reading. Why? Because the rest of your Mishnah said that you interrupt the regular readings during the week. For the rest of the year, you interrupt the regular readings for Chanukah, Purim, a fast day, and the Ma'amados, and for Yom Kippur. Now, we would assume that there's a continuance between these 2 statements of the Mishnah. When it says you're interrupting the regular readings during the week, it means whatever it said, it should go back to the readings after these 4 special readings. So that means that whatever we said you interrupted there, we're talking about when you interrupt here during the week. Now, during the week, there's no Haftorah. So it can be that it was saying up to now you interrupt the readings of the Haftorah and go back to the Haftorah, and then it goes on and it says, and during the week you also interrupt the Haftorah, go back to Haftorah. There is no Haftorah. So just like during the week it's talking about the regular reading of the day, meaning to say on a fast day, that's on a Monday, you won't read the Parsha Shavua for Monday, you'll just read the fast day. It's talking about the reading. So therefore, also when we discussed the 4 Parshas and we said you go back to the reading, it must be that we interrupted the regular reading. Says the Gemara, no, that's not what it means. It's talking about 2 different things. When it talked about the 4 Parshas going back to the reading, it was talking about going back to the Haftorah, because you had only changed the Haftorah. But when it talked about the fast days, where you go back to the regular reading of that day, that was talking about the Kriya. If you had read, you did not read on a Monday. If it was a fast day, you read the fast day reading instead of the Monday reading, and therefore you go back to that. Not a problem. Okay. So now the Gemara wants to know, why is it that you can't read the regular Kriya on a fast day? Why don't you just have 2 Kriyas? You have a time for Kriyas Torah in the morning and Kriyas Torah in the afternoon, by Shachris and by Mincha. So the Shachris read the regular Monday reading, and then in the afternoon read the fast day reading. What's the problem? So the Gemara says, no, there's no time for reading Kriyas Torah and a fast day in the morning, because people got together in Shul and they fasted, and they searched their deeds to make sure that there were no Averos that they needed to fix. The Gemara says, how did you do this? We have a repetition of a Gemara which we've seen in Mesachas Tainis. Abaye says the first half of the day until Chatzos, they got together, everyone in the city, and they analyzed the deeds and the actions of the city as a whole and as the individuals, and they fixed whatever there was that needed to be fixed. Now the second half of the day was divided into 2 halves. The first half, which is the 3rd quarter of the day, from Chatzos until midway in the afternoon, they read and they said Maftir. They did Kriyas Torah and they did Maftir. And then the last quarter of the day, they did Tefillah, they daven. Like it says in the Pasuk in Nehemiah, Vayikru b'sefer Torah Hashem Elokehem Revi'is Hayom, or Revi'is Yom Misvad U'Mishtachlim Hashem Elokehem. So a quarter of the day they did Kriyas Torah, and a quarter of the day they did Tefillah. Says the Gemara, maybe these 2 quarters are the first half of the day. How do you know that the second half of the day? But no, it can't be, because there's another Pasuk. This one's in Ezra that clearly shows this in the last half of the day. It says, Ve'elai Yosvakol Chored B'Devei Elokei Yisrael Al Mala Hagola V'ani Yoshev Meshomim Ad Minchas Ha'erev. Minchas Ha'erev Kamti Mita'anisi V'Kari Bigdiu Me'ili V'Echor Al Birkai V'Efresa Kapai El Hashem Alekai. So it clearly says that it's towards Mincha, was at Mincha time that they did these special tefillos, and therefore was in the latter half of the day. Okay, now the Gemara brings our Mishnah. We got to our next Mishnah. Mishnah discusses the special readings for Yom Tov. So it says the first day of Pesach, we read the list of the Yom Tovim, which is said in Chumash Vayikra, Toras Kahanim. That's in Parshas Emor, where it has Shor Oy Kesev. Now, the rest of Pesach, the Mishnah doesn't say. Rashi says there are special readings of Pesach for each of the days. Now, on Shavuos, so we read Shiva Shavuos. That is found in Kol HaBachor, which is in Re'eh. The Mishnah continues. Rosh Hashanah we read B'chodesh HaShvi'i. Chodesh HaShvi'i is also part of Shar'ei Kesef, also in Vayikra. That's not our meaning. For Rosh Hashanah we read from Parshas Vayera. Now, on Yom Kippur we read in Parshas Achrimos, where we have the description of the Avodah. First day of Sukkot we read again Shar'ei Kesef in Vayikra. The other days of Sukkot we read the special karbonos of Sukkot, which are listed in Parshas Pinchas. Chanukah we read each of the Nesim, the karbonos each of the Nesim brought for the Chanukas HaMizbeach. Purim we read Vayavei Amalek in the end of Parshas B'Shalach. Rosh Chodesh we read B'Rosh Chodshechem in Parshas Pinchas. Ma'amodos, which are the special again days where Klal Yisrael had representatives for the karbonos tamid, there they read from Ma'aseh Bereshis, the creation of the world. Fast days, the Mishnah says, we read from the curses, the klalos, the tochacha in Parshas B'Chokaisai. We don't do that. It's not our minig. It mentions we do not interrupt the klalos to give two aliyahs. It's all one aliyah. You have to have three aliyahs for that day, so two other people will have the brachos, but only one person will have the klalos. And on Monday and on Thursday, on Shabbos Mincha, we read the Parsha of the week. We read one aliyah from the Parsha of the week. The Gemara will describe exactly how. And the Mishnah says it doesn't count towards the lading for Shabbos. You have to read on Shabbos the full Parsha. What we read on Monday, Thursday, and Shabbos Mincha does not take away from that. And you learn that out from the Pasuk in Vayikra, Vayidaber Moshe es Moyad Hashem el Bnei Yisrael, which means you should read all the readings, each one in its proper time.